Cold air pressed against the broken windows of the abandoned storage room where the boy had spent the last 2 nights. He sat with his back against a stack of damp cardboard, trying to breathe slowly so his ribs wouldn't flare in pain. The jacket he wore was too big for him, a donation from a shelter he no longer visited because the older kids there used to push him around and take whatever they wanted. The puppy lay curled against his chest. Its breathing was shallow, uneven. Every few moments it shivered hard, and the boy tightened the jacket around its small body. The animal avoided eye contact, exhausted and confused. It smelled of rain and dirty streets. One of its back legs was swollen, and when he touched the area earlier, the puppy had let out a short, weak grunt, then gone silent again. Outside, trucks moved through the industrial district, but no one ever looked toward this row of empty buildings. No one looked for kids like him. No one looked for stray animals hurting in the cold. He had tried asking for help earlier that morning, but people avoided him. A security guard had told him to move along before he even finished explaining. As the day grew darker, a distant engine rumbled from somewhere past the freight yard. It was slower than the trucks and heavier. He had heard that kind of engine only a few times. Some people in the city said a group of bikers rode through these parts now and then, men who didn't talk much, but didn't tolerate cruelty. The boy had never seen them. He barely believed they were real. The puppy's breathing changed again, a slow stutter that made the boy sit upright. He pressed the animal closer, trying to share what little warmth he had left. Hunger spread through his stomach, but he ignored it. The puppy needed the jacket more than he did. Down the alley, the heavy engine sound grew a little louder, then faded as if the rider had taken another street. The boy didn't move. He just held the puppy tighter and hoped the night wouldn't get any colder. The boy had been drifting between alleys and storage lots for weeks. He kept to places where people rarely walked because every attempt to blend into normal streets ended with someone chasing him away. He had learned to survive by collecting cans, sweeping behind food stalls for scraps, and sleeping where the noise from the highway drowned out everything else. He talked to no one, and no one talked to him, unless they wanted him gone. He first saw the puppy 3 days earlier, limping behind a dumpster near the bus depot. It was trying to lick a torn paper bag that smelled faintly of fried food. The boy crouched slowly, knowing sudden movement would scare it. The puppy flinched anyway, dragging its hurt leg as it tried to back away, but the weight of its own body made it collapse. He waited until its breathing settled before approaching again. He tore a piece of stale bread he had saved in his pocket and placed it on the ground. The puppy sniffed it, hesitated, and then ate in small, shaky bites. That was how it began. From that moment, the puppy followed him at a distance, not close enough to be caught, but close enough to avoid being alone. On the second night, when the wind became too strong, the boy found the half-collapsed storage room and settled inside. The puppy stood in the doorway, trembling as the cold tightened around them both. The boy lifted the oversized jacket and opened it slightly, unsure if the animal understood. The puppy stared for a long second before limping forward and curling itself against him. Since then, they stayed close. The boy gave up half of whatever food he found. The puppy leaned on him whenever the pain in its leg worsened. No adults offered help. A woman selling sandwiches pointed at them and whispered to a co-worker. A man sweeping the bus platform kicked a piece of cardboard toward them so they would move out of sight. By the end of each day, the boy felt himself shrinking, as if he were fading from the world piece by piece. The puppy noticed the tension before anyone else did. Every time footsteps approached too quickly or voices grew sharp, it stiffened and pressed itself against the boy's leg. The city felt unsafe to both of them. Together they were simply trying to stay unnoticed. But the boy's body was tired. His cough had worsened. He hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon, and the puppy's leg was swelling more each day. Without help, neither of them had a clear path forward. Outside the storage room, another truck rattled by. Somewhere above the rooftops, a motorcycle engine echoed for just a second before disappearing again into the maze of streets. The boy didn't look up. He believed no one was coming. The third night inside the storage room felt heavier than the previous ones. Wind hissed through the broken window frame, pushing dust across the floor. The boy stayed awake longer than he wanted because every small noise made the puppy lift its head in alarm. It wasn't barking. It barely had the strength. It only pressed its body against his side and watched the dark with wide, uncertain eyes. Earlier that day, they had tried to look for food near the market. The boy knew the vendors threw away damaged produce before closing. But the moment he stepped behind the stalls, a worker shouted at him from across the pavement. The man didn't run, didn't even get close. He just barked instructions to leave. The boy didn't argue. Arguing always made things worse. He backed away slowly, the puppy limping after him. People saw them, but no one really saw them. A mother pulled her child closer as the boy walked by. A teenager laughed when the puppy stumbled and fell trying to keep up. The boy picked it up gently, even though his arms shook from hunger. He tried to hide behind a delivery van until the crowd thinned. But the moment he bent down, someone threw a small stone at his feet to scare him off. He didn't look back to see who it was. He just hurried away. By afternoon, the storage district was the only place that didn't push them out. But even there, silence felt hostile. Every creak sounded like someone angry approaching. Every gust of wind made the puppy tremble hard enough that the boy had to wrap both arms around it until the shivering slowed. The puppy's behavior changed as the fear around them kept stacking. When the boy stepped too far away, even for a moment, the animal whimpered sharply. When he tried to stand and stretch, the puppy nudged at his foot as if begging him not to leave. It felt the instability before the boy acknowledged it. It sensed the boy's exhaustion, the tightening in his shoulders, the way he scanned every doorway before walking past. The puppy moved closer each hour, needing contact as much as the boy needed reassurance that he wasn't completely invisible. At nightfall, hunger clawed at him again. The boy tried ignoring it, but the dizziness made his vision blur. He pressed the puppy against his chest, focusing on its tiny breaths. The animal's leg was hot to the touch, the swelling worse. He knew infections didn't get better on their own. But clinics wouldn't take him in, and shelters didn't allow animals. He stared into the darkness, listening carefully. Somewhere far away, a motorcycle engine growled for a moment. It didn't sound hostile, it didn't sound rushed, just steady, present. The boy wondered briefly who would ride through this part of the city at night. He wondered if the biker had somewhere warm to go, someone waiting, a full meal, clean clothes. The sound faded, swallowed by the wind. The boy lowered his head. For him and the puppy, night only meant colder air and longer hours. Still, he held the small animal closer. Fear was familiar. Being pushed aside was familiar. But the weight of the puppy against his ribs was new. It reminded him that something in the world needed him, even if only because no one else bothered to look. Morning arrived without sunlight. The sky over the industrial district was a flat sheet of grey that made everything look colder than it already was. The boy woke with a sharp cramp twisting in his stomach. The puppy slept tucked under the jacket, but when he moved, the animal let out a faint, pained whine. Its leg had stiffened overnight, and the swelling had spread up toward the hip. The boy knew the infection was getting worse. He stood slowly, afraid he might faint if he moved too fast. The dizziness came anyway, a slow wave that forced him to lean against the wall until the floor stopped tilting. He pulled the jacket tighter around the puppy and stepped into the alley. The air smelled of chemicals from the factories across the tracks. The ground was wet from a thin drizzle, and puddles spread across the broken asphalt. He headed toward the bus depot again, even though the staff had pushed him away the previous day. He wasn't trying to beg. He only hoped someone had dropped food or that he could find a half-eaten sandwich in one of the bins. He carried the puppy inside the jacket, keeping its head close to his chest. Every few steps, the boy looked around as if expecting trouble. Near the depot entrance, a group of teenagers leaned against a bench. One of them pointed at the boy and said something the others reacted to with laughter. The boy lowered his head and moved to the edge of the pavement. His shoulders curled inward. He didn't speak, didn't make eye contact. He just kept walking, trying not to draw attention. It didn't work. A worker sweeping the walkway blocked his path. The man didn't touch him, but he stepped forward with enough force to make the boy stumble back. The puppy squirmed at the sudden movement, whining sharply. The man didn't seem to care. He flicked his hand toward the road, signaling the boy to disappear. The boy nodded, even though his throat felt tight, and turned away. His body felt weaker with each step back toward the storage district. His hands were shaking from the cold and lack of food. The puppy pressed its nose into the fabric of the jacket, breathing fast and shallow. The boy tried to comfort it with a slow stroke along its back. The road leading toward the industrial blocks was almost empty. Trucks passed occasionally, but no one walked there unless they needed to. The boy crossed to the far side of the road to avoid the factory entrance. Someone had yelled at him there 2 days earlier for sitting near the fence. He didn't want to give anyone a reason to shout again. As he passed one of the abandoned warehouses, a motorcycle engine echoed from the opposite street. It wasn't fast. It wasn't loud. It was steady in a way that made the boy pause. He looked toward the sound, but the building blocked his view. The engine slowed, then idled for a moment. A voice on the far side of the warehouse said something he couldn't make out. Then the engine revved again and faded into the distance. He didn't know why the sound bothered him. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something he couldn't explain. As if the noise held a weight that didn't fit the silent streets around him. By midday, the drizzle turned heavier. The boy hurried back to the storage room, but when he arrived, the door he usually squeezed through was blocked. A metal panel had fallen overnight, sealing most of the opening. He tried pushing it, but his arms were too weak. He tried lifting it, but the rusted edge cut into his hand. The puppy whimpered at the sudden movement, and he stopped. He needed another place to stay dry. He scanned the alley and noticed an old loading bay with a roof still intact. The platform was high, almost above his chest. He placed the puppy down carefully, then tried to pull himself up. His arms trembled. On the second attempt, he managed to grip the edge, but his foot slipped on the wet asphalt and he fell backward. The landing knocked the air out of him. The puppy limped toward him with uneven steps, anxious and confused. The boy sat up slowly. His hand shook uncontrollably, and blood seeped from the cut where the metal panel had sliced him. He pressed the jacket sleeve against it and tried again. This time he got halfway up the platform before collapsing forward, his body giving out from exhaustion. He lay there for a moment, breathing through the pain. When he finally rolled to his side, he saw the puppy struggling to climb the small ramp attached to the loading bay. The boy reached down and lifted it with both hands. The puppy rested its head against his chest, breathing fast, its body hot from the infection. The boy knew the situation wasn't safe anymore. Not for him, not for the puppy. His body felt too weak, and the animal's condition was clearly worsening. He needed help, but every place he had tried pushed him away. Late in the afternoon, a truck roared past the alley, and behind it, for just a second, the deep growl of a motorcycle carried through the air again. It was close this time. Close enough that he sat up straighter without thinking. He didn't know why he reacted. Maybe it was the steadiness of the sound. Maybe it was the memory of what people whispered about the bikers who sometimes rode through this part of town. He held the puppy against him as the engine noise passed the mouth of the alley. It slowed. It hesitated. Then it moved on. The boy lowered his head. The rain kept falling. The cold kept tightening. And the day kept pushing him toward something he felt but couldn't name. Twilight settled over the industrial blocks, turning the puddles on the asphalt into dark mirrors. The boy sat under the loading bay roof, the puppy trembling against his chest. Its breathing was uneven now, each inhale a shallow tug. The boy's own chest ached from hunger and the fall earlier, but he tried to keep the jacket wrapped tightly around the animal. The drizzle had soaked through everything. Down the alley, footsteps approached, not hurried, not gentle either, just the kind of steps made by someone who owned the space they walked through. The boy stiffened. He pulled the puppy closer, trying not to breathe too loudly. A man emerged from the shadows near the old warehouse fence. He wore a heavy work jacket, hands deep in the pockets, the hood low over his face. He walked with certainty, scanning the area. The boy didn't know him, but he recognized the type. Someone looking for trouble that wasn't theirs to start with. The man stopped a few meters away. He stared at the boy for a moment, then stepped closer. The boy tried to shrink back, but there was nowhere to go. His legs were too weak to run. His hands trembled around the puppy as he lowered his gaze to the ground. The man muttered something under his breath, annoyed. He gestured at the loading bay like the boy was trespassing on something valuable. The boy tried to slide aside slowly, but the movement made the puppy whine. The man's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward sharply and kicked the metal edge of the platform. The sound was harsh and sudden. The boy flinched so hard he almost dropped the puppy. The man lifted one foot to climb onto the platform. The boy shifted to shield the puppy with his body. The puppy sensed the threat instantly. Its ears flattened, and despite the pain in its leg, it pushed itself halfway out of the jacket. It let out a low, unsteady growl. The man raised his voice, angry at the noise. He stepped forward again, closing the space between them. The boy pressed the puppy against himself, but the animal broke free of his grip for a moment and tried to stand in front of him. Its legs shook, its breathing uneven, but it positioned itself between the boy and the man. The man reached down, grabbing the boy by the arm to pull him off the platform. The puppy lunged, not with strength, not with speed, but with instinct. Its teeth caught the man's pant leg near the ankle. The grip wasn't strong, but it was enough to startle him. He yanked his leg back violently. The puppy was thrown off balance, rolling sideways on the wet wood. A sharp yelp broke from its throat. The boy scrambled forward, pulling the puppy back into his arms. The man cursed and stepped closer again, lifting his arm as if preparing to shove the boy off the platform entirely. Something else cut through the alley. A deep, rumbling engine sound, closer than before. It wasn't passing this time. It was approaching directly from the street that emptied into the alley. The man froze at the noise. The boy held still, gripping the puppy tightly. The motorcycle entered the alley slowly, its headlights slicing through the dim light. The rider was large, wearing a worn leather vest over a thick hoodie. Patches covered the vest, symbols, colors, a name across the back, Steel Guardians. The rider stopped the bike mid-alley, engine idling low and steady. The man near the platform stepped back, tension spreading across his shoulders. The biker lifted his visor only halfway. His eyes moved from the man to the boy, then down to the small bundle of fur trembling in the boy's arms. Something in the biker's posture shifted, a sudden stillness, as if his own body recognized something before his mind caught up. He dismounted without hurry. No anger, no raised voice, just a heavy, grounded presence, the kind that made the alley feel smaller. He walked toward the platform. The man backed away another step. The biker didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed on the puppy. He crouched slowly, not too close, not reaching, just watching, breathing, processing. His voice came out low, steady. He said one word the boy didn't understand, but the puppy reacted. Its head lifted slightly. Its ears twitched. The boy felt the tremor of recognition move through the animal. The biker's chest expanded sharply. His jaw tightened. His breath escaped in a short, stunned exhale. He whispered another word. Quiet, controlled, but heavy with disbelief. The boy didn't understand that one either, but the biker knew exactly what he was looking at. The puppy wasn't just any stray, it belonged to someone, his daughter. The biker stood slowly, turning toward the man who had tried to pull the boy away. The shift in his posture was enough. The man stepped back again, until he reached the mouth of the alley. He didn't run, but he left quickly, muttering to himself as he disappeared around the corner. The biker returned his attention to the boy. He didn't crowd him. He just held out one hand, not touching, just offering proximity and safety the boy had never felt from an adult. The boy hesitated, before loosening his grip on the puppy enough for the biker to see the swollen leg, the trembling chest, the exhaustion written across every breath. The biker swallowed hard. His eyes were no longer steady. Something inside him had cracked open. He took off his heavy jacket and wrapped it around both the boy and the puppy in one slow, careful motion. The warmth was immediate. The boy didn't understand why the biker's hands shook slightly as he did it, but he understood one thing. Someone had finally shown up. The biker didn't rush. He didn't speak in a way that demanded anything. He only checked the puppy's condition with steady hands, lifting the injured leg gently and frowning at the heat spreading beneath the skin. The boy watched every movement, afraid the animal would be taken from him. But the biker didn't pull the puppy away. He just secured the jacket around both of them and signaled with a small motion for the boy to follow. The boy hesitated. His legs felt unsteady, his stomach hollow. The drizzle had turned into a steady, cold rain. The biker seemed to understand that the boy couldn't walk far. He walked back to his motorcycle and reached into a side compartment. He pulled out a folded blanket and returned to wrap it around the boy's shoulders. It was heavy and warm, and the weight of it grounded him enough to stand. The biker crouched in front of the platform so the boy could climb onto his back. The boy didn't move at first. He wasn't used to anyone offering support. The puppy whimpered, its breath growing shallow. That sound pushed the boy into motion. He wrapped one arm around the biker's shoulder and let himself be lifted down gently. Another engine rumbled at the far end of the alley. A second motorcycle turned in, then a third. Their lights cut through the rain. The men riding them wore the same colors, the same patches. They parked without blocking the path, without crowding the boy. Their presence was quiet but solid. One of them carried a small first aid pouch. Another pulled the hood of his jacket up as he walked over, checking the alley like he expected trouble to return. None of them spoke loudly. None of them stared at the boy. They focused on the situation with a calmness that made the tension in the air lose its sharp edge. The first biker, the one who had recognized the puppy, lifted the animal gently from the boy's arms, but only after giving him a moment to nod. The puppy didn't resist. It lay limp against the biker's chest, exhausted. He checked its breathing again, then handed it carefully to one of the other men who had veterinary training. The man examined the swollen leg with precise movements. He murmured something quiet to the first biker, something the boy couldn't hear, but the shift in their faces said everything. The puppy needed attention fast. One of the bikers unstrapped a small insulated container from his bike and opened it. Inside were basic supplies: saline, wound cleaner, bandages. The man with the veterinary training cleaned the leg carefully. The puppy whimpered but didn't pull away. Its eyes stayed half open, watching the boy even as pain made its body twitch. The boy's breathing turned shallow. The cold, the hunger, the fear, it all crashed down at once. His legs buckled. Before he hit the ground, one of the bikers steadied him with a hand on his shoulder. The touch wasn't forceful. It was steady, grounding. Another biker opened the storage compartment of his motorcycle and produced a thermos. He handed it to the first biker, who offered it to the boy. Inside was warm broth. The scent alone made the boy's stomach twist painfully. He took a shaky sip. Warmth spread across his chest, and the dizziness eased slightly. A woman stepped out from behind the third bike, rain dripping from her gloves. She wore the same patch, Steel Guardians, but her vest was lined with a bright strip of cloth near the collar. She approached the boy slowly, examining his cut hand, the bruises along his arm, the way he winced when he breathed. She cleaned the wound without a word. Her movements were firm and steady. The boy watched the first biker holding the puppy. His grip was careful but sure, the way someone held something precious. There was no mistaking the tension in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. He recognized the animal. The boy didn't know the details, but he knew what it meant when someone looked at a dog like that. The woman tightened the bandage around the boy's hand and stepped back. One of the bikers nodded toward a nearby truck loading zone, a place with a small overhang, better shelter. They moved together, slow and deliberate, making sure the boy could keep up. When they reached the shelter, the first biker crouched near the boy again, the puppy resting against his chest. He didn't ask for explanations. He didn't demand answers. He simply adjusted the jacket around the boy and let him lean against the wall. The boy closed his eyes for a moment, breathing through the ache in his ribs. The rain kept falling. The engines cooled behind them. And for the first time in days, the boy wasn't bracing for someone to yell at him. The street felt different now, quiet, but not empty. The presence of the bikers filled the space with something solid, something that didn't push him away. The puppy let out a faint breath, its nose pressed lightly against the biker's collarbone. The man looked down at it, exhaled slowly, and then looked at the boy. His expression held a quiet weight, something between worry and gratitude. Help had arrived. Not dramatic help, not loud or showy, just the kind that stayed long enough for things to stop getting worse. 2 months passed before the boy understood how close he and the puppy had come to losing everything that night. The infection in the puppy's leg had required more than cleaning. The biker with veterinary training had taken the animal to a small clinic he trusted, one that didn't ask questions and knew the Steel Guardians by name. The puppy stayed there for a week. The boys stayed at the club's community garage during that time, sleeping on a spare cot set up near the back office, eating whatever simple meals the members left for him. No one forced conversation. No one demanded stories. They just created a space where silence didn't feel dangerous. When the puppy returned from treatment, its leg wrapped and healing, the reunion was quiet but intense. The animal pushed its head against the boy's chest and stayed there until its breathing slowed. The boy held on with both arms, afraid to let go. The biker who had found them, the one whose daughter owned the puppy, kept his distance at first. Not because he didn't care, but because he was trying to navigate the strange mix of relief and responsibility settling over him. His daughter had been devastated when the puppy went missing months earlier. Finding it alive had pulled something raw to the surface. Eventually, he introduced the boy to his daughter in the most careful way he knew. They met in the club's yard one afternoon, the puppy hobbling on its healing leg to greet her. The girl dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around the dog. She thanked the boy in a quiet voice, not out of politeness, but out of genuine recognition. She knew exactly what the boy had done to keep the puppy alive. The boy didn't move into anyone's home. That wasn't the kind of story he lived in. But the club helped him find a stable place to stay, a small room above a storage office owned by a friend of the Guardians. It wasn't new, it wasn't warm all the time, but it was his. The puppy stayed with him during the day and with the girl some evenings, forming a rhythm that made sense to everyone involved. The bruises on the boy's ribs healed slowly. The cut on his hand faded. The weight in his stomach each night eased as regular meals replaced scraps. He didn't grow loud or confident or fearless, but he grew steady, the kind of steady that comes from knowing someone will answer if he knocks on a door. The Steel Guardians didn't hover. They didn't step into his life every minute. They simply passed by the storage district more often, engines rumbling in the distance. Sometimes one of them stopped to hand him a new blanket. Sometimes they dropped off extra food for the puppy. Sometimes they just nodded from their bikes, letting him know they were there. Weeks later, the boy sat on the curb outside his small room, the puppy lying across his lap. The sun was low, turning the concrete a muted gold. The air smelled like warm asphalt and motor oil from the garage down the street. A convoy of 3 bikes rolled past slowly, the guardians heading toward the main road. The first biker glanced his way and lifted 2 fingers from the handlebar in a silent greeting. The boy nodded back, not rising, not calling out, just acknowledging the presence that had changed everything without demanding anything in return. The puppy shifted in his lap, its healing leg twitching slightly. It wasn't fully strong yet, but it would be. The boy rested his hand on its back, feeling the slow rise and fall of its breath. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't supposed to be. But it was stable enough to keep moving. Safe enough to breathe through the nights. Human enough to feel real. When no one else had shown up, the Steel Guardians had ridden in. Not with promises, not with speeches, just with action and presence. The boy leaned back against the wall, letting the evening settle around him.